to Arden's Neurodiversity podcast. This is Arden's third year celebrating Brain Awareness Week, which is a global campaign held every March, focused on encouraging interest and support for brain science. This year we're exploring the concept of neurodiversity and we'll be interviewing a variety of individuals to explore just how diverse our brains can be and how that impacts our experiences. Our podcast will cover a diverse range of experiences that might cover stigma, personal struggles, or potentially triggering subjects. Some of these terms that we use might be unfamiliar, so we're going to quickly go over them right now. Neurodiversity is the understanding that neurocognitive diversity is a valuable part of biodiversity. Different ways of thinking, viewing, and experiencing the world contribute to our wider society, and there is no normal or ideal way to be. Neurodivergence is a term to differentiate those who deviate from the norm in their neurocognitive type without using medicalized deficit model language. Neurotypical doesn't mean neurologically privileged, but it does mean the world is set up to cater for this neurotype by default. It's important to note that self-diagnosis is valid and many undiagnosed people will have unmet needs, so a lack of diagnosis doesn't mean that someone's neurotypical by default.
It's great to welcome you here, Nick, and we're really excited about you taking part in this interview for Brain Awareness Week at Arden University, in which we'll be talking with you about your experiences of neurodiversity and neurodivergence. And I know that you've much experience on various levels, including personal and professional. So, welcome, Nick.
Thank you for having me.
Without much ado, if it's all right with you, we'll begin the interview. So, so my first question to you is, what is your neurodivergence, if you're comfortable sharing, and what does neurodiversity mean to you would be the leading on from that?
Okay. I have two neurodivergences. I was diagnosed a few years ago as having dyslexia, which I'd suspected for a long time, but had never been confirmed or acted upon. And last year I was diagnosed with ADHD, which I didn't have any idea about, but it became increasingly clear that simply treating my dyslexia as the main problem that I was dealing with, along with a number of years of being treated for various levels of depression, neither of those two, or even both of them together, were actually addressing the problems that I had that just wouldn't go away. Other things were made better. Those two, between the depression and the dyslexia between them, accounted for an awful lot of the sort of day-to-day difficulties. But the overall pattern didn't make any sense until the ADHD diagnosis was given. At which point it suddenly, you look at it and you go, yes, that's me to a T. So that's really my experience of it.
That's very, very interesting how you put that. Sorry that it's just that's actually highlighted for me that you, so you had two things that you were working with essentially, and then the diagnosis of ADHD put everything into perspective and made it all make sense.
Yes.
Have I understood correctly?
Yes. Yes, that's correct.
That's interesting.
The more I read about ADHD and how it can co-occur with other diversities, and it can also, untreated, it can also kind of lead to other issues like depression or whatever. That all begins to be part of a wider pattern that makes sense when looked at them as discrete individual issues.
So, when did you say that you were diagnosed with with dyslexia? How old were you then, if you don't mind me asking?
No, not at all. That was 2015, so I was 44.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't when you were young then? No.
No. I was told categorically that I wasn't. Actually, when I was at university, I was told that because I was colourblind, I couldn't possibly be dyslexic.
Oh, how interesting. How interesting.
It's clearly nonsense, but
Yeah.
I think the meaning behind that was of a different. It wasn't a clinical decision. It just meant that if I had colour blindness, then there was no way I could apply for help with dyslexia, because I was supposedly being helped for one thing.
On one level.
I wasn't being helped for anything. But I think the rules at the time may have been that if you've got one form of assistance, then they probably won't spring another form of assistance. I can rationalise it looking back, because as a clinical fact, it's obviously absolute nonsense. Of course you can be colourblind and dyslexic. But I just think they didn't want to pay to help me.
Or it was something to do with the system, but that's the effects of that, I can imagine, so if you had to wait all those years until you definitely found out about the dyslexia, then that's
I just assumed that I didn't have it, because I thought I was when I was young, when I got to university and I was having such trouble writing, and went through all the sort of local authority level hoops to get to a position where I was told, no, you're colourblind, that's definite, so you definitely can't be dyslexic. And you think, well, okay, that's it, I'm not dyslexic, I've just got to try harder. And it was another 20 years before someone said, oh no, you're quite clearly dyslexic.
Oh my goodness,
that's
okay,
absolutely blindingly obvious that you're dyslexic. I've never met anybody as obviously who yet, you know.
Oh, fascinating. Yeah, sorry, that's not necessarily the right word, fascinating, but it's definitely made me think. But
I think it is. I think it certainly is fascinating. I just wish it was fascinating in somebody else's life.
Yeah, I understand. I'm going to ask you now a sort of sub-question to that, which is, what does it mean to you, would you say, personally, neurodivergence, your experience of neurodiversion? Is it in terms of identity, community, disability, variety, and so on? Is it, how would you, in what way would you say this relates to your own experience of yourself, if you see what I mean?
It's a good question. I don't really know. I think as it is, being a kind of a newish diagnosis, it's now, like I said, it's now something, a filter through which much of my behaviour and quite a lot of the sort of difficulties I've had in my life make sense. So I don't feel like it's a community thing, but I don't feel it's not. I feel like I can more easily identify those ways in which I'm similar to some people, and it turns out that they're probably we have similarities, and you go, oh yeah, no, I do that, you do that. You know, we can relate on that level as well as any other kind of level we might relate on. Yeah. But also, it kind of puts into a really good context those times when I feel I really don't get on with people, and it turns out that they might be a different sort of neurodiverse, or you know, that they might just be neurotypical, and you know, I might just be really informed, and that's fine.
So it's basically giving you. I like the word. I like the description of a filter with which you view the world, because the way I understood that was that it's given you a sort of an awareness of yourself and of other people, and also a sort of, as you said, a filter, a way in which to sort of understand that other people are different and in ways in which you're the same. So there are overlaps and so on, which make it easier for you to negotiate. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I can share with other ADHD people the sort of things that I know now are common to ADHD people, and we can discuss how that affects us. We can discuss how we deal with it, or how we meet, and you know, discuss our troubles relating to different sorts of people, or the joy of relating to different sorts of people.
Does that mean that you do feel then? Do you feel connected to the neurodivergent sort of or disabled community in that sense? Sorry, I'm just using those terms as a that is how some people would
Yeah,
talk
that's
about
true.
those
Some people-
communities. So I don't know if you feel that fits to you or to those communities in general, but just out of interest, do you feel connected in that sense then? Or do you feel like you've got a foot, sort of a kind of, you overlap with them and you feel you understand them?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I guess I don't really feel these things as disabilities because I've had no other experience. Somebody once asked me, I'm a twin. Somebody once asked me, what's it like being a twin? To which I replied, what's it like not being a twin?
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think of myself as disabled, but I know that I have a greater degree of difficulty with some things than people with normal brains. And now I know why that is, whether that be a cognitive kind of effect or an ADHD kind of effect. I know what those things are. And yes, I would quite like people to cut me some slack sometimes. I would quite like an adjustment that says, you know what, don't do that. Don't get yourself involved with spreadsheets and admin because you're crap at it. And you will always be crap at it, no matter how hard you try. And you do try.
Yeah.
And I feel like I can reasonably absent myself from those sorts of things I'm utterly hopeless at. Unless there's nobody else and it's my job and there's nobody else to do it for me, to run do my admin, and I have to do that myself. But yeah, I think in that sense, I'd quite like to press the disability button and go, no, you don't understand, this is really hard.
Yeah.
And it's doubly hard for me because of these things, but it's not that I don't want to do it, it's just that it really does make more sense if I give the job to somebody else.
I totally can understand that. That's and it's I mentioned that on purpose because obviously I have to say I don't feel if I'm thinking about people who are neurodivergent, I certainly don't feel or consider them to be disabled in the sense that they're not able to function as well as or something as neurotypical people. But I wanted to ask you that because, and you've answered it, it's very interesting how you've answered it because it does touch upon the fact that people who have who are neurodivergent in the sense that they don't function in the same way as people who seem to be neurotypical are therefore, as you say, maybe having issues with certain things which other people don't. And so, it's very interesting to sort of notice how you might be grateful for somebody to understand that. It doesn't mean that you're not going to do something as well as, if not better than somebody else. It just means that there might be times where it's good for people to know and understand. So that's why I mentioned that. And I think you said that really, really well.
Yes, I would like to clarify that I think if I were to describe myself as disabled in any way, I would say I was disabled in terms of like office admin. In the same way, somebody with a missing leg might be disabled in terms of running or swimming. It's not that they can't, just that you wouldn't put an able-bodied person and somebody with missing leg in the same race and expect the same things from them.
Yes.
It wouldn't be fair and it wouldn't make sense. So I feel that in that sense, I'm disabled. I can't do admin nearly as well as somebody who's neurologically different to me. But I can do it. But I really don't want to. Yeah,
I understand. I did mean to ask you at the very beginning which language you'd like us to use during the interview. So your identity, which kind of your first person. I'm guessing that you're fine with how we're continuing the interview now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, first person's fine. Yeah.
I skipped across my questions. I skipped across my questions because we entered into something which I was going to ask you later. You were already there. So you've kind of touched upon that. My next question would have been, how does your neurodivergence impact your daily or your academic or your working life? So I know you've already touched upon that, but if you could then maybe just enlarge that a little bit, that'd be really great.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think academically, let's go from there. Academically, I wasn't great at school because of various things. It wasn't that I wasn't bright; it was just that I just didn't want to be there and absented myself whenever the opportunities presented themselves. So I kind of missed out on about half the time I was doing O levels and about half the time I was doing A levels because I just didn't want to go to school. So I just rode bicycles, which was a lot more fulfilling. And I think it may have been a combination of the dyslexic and ADHD kind of effects, and not knowing that either of them actually existed. It was just, it didn't work. It didn't fit in. I couldn't get my shit together, and I didn't know why, and nobody else knew why either.
Yeah.
And because nobody else knew why, it was nobody's job to take the time to look at it and go, you need an adjustment, or you need to think about things in a different way. And without being told I could think about things in a different way, or I should think about things in a different way, it was just, you're not doing so well, weird because you're quite bright. Oh, well, you're probably not trying hard enough. And my response to that as an ADHD thing, which I now realise, was to go, oh, well, screw this then. I'm going to do something that I can do, that I do enjoy, that gives me the dopamine that I need to feel good about myself. Then I would, go off and ride bicycles and then go off and take pictures. And then, when it came to writing essays for my degree, I was hopeless because I couldn't do anything on a computer at the time because I didn't own one. I didn't know how to use one. So I would handwrite all my essays, and my handwriting, of course, was beneath atrocious. So it was physically and mentally extraordinarily challenging for me to write anything that was in any way legible. But what I did write was normally quite good. So yeah, I mean, it was people were calling me the word ambulance because I was always able to find words and phrasing for other people to put in their essays to express what they were trying to say. You give me the meaning and context, and I'll write it. Literally, just spill it out of my head for you. But I couldn't write anything of my own on my own papers, on my own essays. So it's just horrible.
Do you think? So would you have been able to say it if you could have sort of recorded it? Do you think it might have been something you could have? Just out of interest.
People had suggested that, and I did kind of have a dictaphone, and I think a lot of us did have a dictaphone, and so you talk into it to make voice notes or what have you. But I don't think an actual kind of stand-up Viva rather than an essay would have been something I was up to at the time. But had I known why that would have been a better option for me, or that it was available and I could have practiced it, then yes, I think that might have been a better option. But I wouldn't necessarily say for certain that when I was in my 20s I was ready for it.
I can certainly see that must have been very stressful. That seems to me like that would have been a very stressful thing, where you knew that you could think about, you could definitely understand, and you wanted to get it down, but you, if I'm understanding right, but you couldn't actually sort of do it as well as you wanted to.
I think the thing is with ADHD is that we react quite well to external stimuli. So in a conversation, I'm more than happy. My brain goes off, it sparks. You talk, I talk. Ideas happen in the spaces between the people having the conversation, and that's what I pick up on. That's what I magnify. Those are the little seeds that get into my head and just bring the ideas to life. But actually standing up and giving a speech, I'd probably end up having to have the notes for it anyway, so I might as well just do the essay.
Okay.
My most first comes to when it comes to growing and expressing ideas.
Okay. And so, thank you. That's really, really, really interesting and useful. So many things to say to that, but there are other questions, so I'll go on. So how did you find out that you're neurodivergent? I think we've really touched upon that already as well. You've sort of said that, but maybe you could tell us about that a little more, and also how did your perception of yourself change from the moment where you were diagnosed?
Okay.
if at all?
Well, yes. Well, sure, absolutely. So the first one with the dyslexia, I was working in a job where it's a photography job. But a lot of what I was having to do was manual data entry because we were doing a lot of e-commerce shots for websites and brochures. So everything we did had to be catalogued with a code and various bits and pieces so that it could be found in the company's systems. And my data entry wasn't very good in that it wasn't always particularly accurate. And they took me to one side and asked me if I had a problem. And I said, well, like what? And they said, are you dyslexic? And I said, well, I think so. And they said, well, why didn't you tell us at interview? And I said, well, because I haven't had a diagnosis. And they said, okay. I said, also, the law says I don't have to tell you.
Yeah.
I don't feel you need to know. And they were kind of a bit miffed, but they said, well, we're going to have to send you for an assessment to see if you are dyslexic. And I thought, brilliant.
Yeah.
Actually, someone gives a damn. I know they're only covering themselves, but that's a really good opportunity for me to find out. And somebody else is paying for it. Brilliant. Let's do it. I just thought, it's great.
Yeah.
So I went up to the office of the psychologist and had the interview, did all the tests and stuff. And he was like, no, you clearly are. You're great with words. You're terrible with, some of the other things. He said, actually, you're much, much better with words than you are with pictures, which must be something of a surprise to you as a photographer. And I said, well, no, because somebody said that to me on my photography degree. Actually, you're really, really good with words, better than you are with photographs. And at the time, I thought, well, that's a bit of an insult, because here I am, I've got the country's best photography degree, and I know that I'm rubbish at writing, so I must be terrible at photography. That kind of put it all into context, and I know the company were really only trying to find ways to, get rid of me, and that was fine because I hated working there. So yeah, that kind of made sense. So I've obviously telling everybody for years and saying, I am dyslexic after all. They were like, well, yeah. At the time,
I know you're laughing. You're laughing about this, and you're obviously, and I know you to be a very positive person and so on. But for me, what comes across when you're telling me all of these things is how incredibly stressful I can imagine that this must have been over so many years. Where, first of all, you don't know, and you know that there's something that you feel like doesn't sort of fit, and then you're trying to find all sorts of ways around it and so on. I just imagine it being incredibly stressful. So it's very impressive how you've managed to come through all those years.
Coping strategies sometimes include alcoholic beverages.
Yes, my next question was going to be about coping strategies. So I'd be interested to know how you've coped.
Okay, so just to finish off the previous question.
Yeah, beg your pardon.
The PhD thing came about because even kind of a few years later, I was still struggling with all the things I used to struggle with, even though the dyslexia diagnosis put a lot of things into context. I still wasn't getting the things done, making the progress, building the structures that I needed to, and it was really getting me down. I was very depressed. I was just despairing. I was considering, giving up. Yeah. And a colleague of my wife's was experiencing he complained about similar things, and he'd gone and had an assessment, and they found out he had ADHD, and he started taking medication, and he found it really helpful. And my wife said, well, would you consider having an assessment? I was like, God, yeah, absolutely, I want to know. Yeah. So we did that, and it turns out I was, and they didn't have any question about that, and started medication, and I wouldn't say it was a light switch, but it certainly helped. Yeah. So, but that then started to make sense of all the other stuff. And, I think now the process over the last year has been about sorting out the bits and pieces. Imagine you've got, 5, 6 different colours of Lego, and you're just going through all this stuff, and now it makes sense. You go, well, I can put the yellow Lego there, and blue Lego there, and grey Lego. and I know why these things don't fit together. I know they're not the same shapes and colours, and you can start to put some order around the things that were previously just a bag of stuff.
Yeah.
And I go, well, these are other things. So the coping strategy around that, I think, with the medication really helped.
Ah, okay.
Me. I drank a lot more when I was in my 30s and early 40s, possibly for the right reasons and almost certainly for the wrong reasons. Coping with the ADHD has been easier than coping undiagnosed. I mean, my wife, who is autistic, has been really helpful, and we kind of, we help each other. We tease each other about these things, but we help each other to sort of point out these things and go, oh, that's an autistic thing, or that's an ADHD thing. So we look after each other in that respect. But I think in terms of coping strategies, I mean, other than familial support or a beer, knowing that I'm going to struggle with some things and knowing why that is, rather than just thinking I don't want to do it. I think I know I don't want to do it. I know why I don't. And I know why I don't want to do it. And these.
Yes, now you understand that.
I do not expect too much of myself when I attempt something like that. Or to break it down, or to ask for help, or to ask for a demonstration. And rather than doing the kind of, the thing that was sort of we were brought up expected to do, which was, just get on with it, and you're clever, you'll figure it out. Actually going, well, I am clever, but I'm not very good at this. I will figure it out faster if you help me. And if my doing it is important to you, then you helping me will help get the result that you want, and then we'll both be happier. And great. I mean, that's, I think, giving yourself permission to be shit at something and giving yourself to ask for help, especially from a part of the world that we do where people are not really allowed to be shit at things.
Sorry for what
pressure. It takes the weight off, and you go, do you know what? I can be rubbish at that and still be a valid human being and not have to feel dreadful for myself. And you can thank the person who helps you. You can really give something to them in terms of praise and gratitude, and say, look, you've really helped me. You've no idea how much that means to me. That's very special, and I'd like to thank you. And you can make them feel good. And of course, that kind of tees them up to think, well, I could probably help you again because you've made me feel nice about myself. I could help other people. So I think you can give back in a way that makes the world a better place by showing your gratitude for somebody else's care.
That's so fantastic, and that's such a lovely message. And also, so from what you're saying, it shows me so much that when one's undiagnosed, certainly for some things and in some situations, the sense of sort of not understanding what's going on with oneself, and then being able to make sense of all of that, and then it sounds as if being able to make sense of that has allowed you also to connect with other people and to actually sort of be back in the world, so to speak, and to have the feeling that you're actually part of everything now, because you can bring other people in and help and talk to them and help them to understand and help them to understand and help you, and vice versa. And at this point, I'm just going to interrupt briefly because our time is nearly up on the Zoom, and I need to stop the recording and then come back in again. Yeah. Sorry, I had to say that, so I'm going to just do that, if that's all right. Sorry, Nick. I'm just going to quickly ask you the next question, which is, what is the value of being diagnosed, then, would you say, leading on from what we were just talking about, being diagnosed with neurodivergence?
I think it really is about self-awareness and identity, but only in a sort of a personal sense for me at this stage. But I get the idea that I can benefit from being part of a wider community, and that does seem like a positive thing. But I'm not at the stage yet where actually, because I've lived most of my life undiagnosed, I don't identify as ADHD. I just identify a lot of my difficulties and some of my strengths as being part of ADHD. And it's been fun and useful and exciting to talk to other people about these things and to have kind of my experiences validated by other people saying, "Oh, no, that happens to me as well." But yeah, in terms of it doesn't feel, the important thing is it doesn't feel at all negative. I don't feel like I'm less of a person, and I don't feel like I need to wear a badge. But I guess it's an ADHD thing. Never felt the need to wear a badge and go, "I'm one of these."
No.
If anything, quite the opposite. If someone says, "Join the club," I say, "No, no, I'm going to go over there and do something else."
Yeah. So, actually, before I go on to the next question, could you briefly, well, I don't mind actually, but could you tell us what are the really good things about ADHD? I mean, or ADHD, and I don't know if there are good things about dyslexia, but what are the good things about being neurodivergent for you, would you say? What sort of benefits do you have, if at all?
Okay, well, I guess people often kind of talk about neurodivergent kind of ADHD and also dyslexia in particular as people who are kind of creative thinkers and they can improvise and they're good in a difficult situation and they think outside the box and they're not constrained by rules and expectations. And all of those things are true.
Yeah.
And they are things that I, in any case, I think have valued throughout my life. And I think those things appeal more to me as an identity than a diagnosis label does.
Yeah.
It's only because, I like the fact that I'm creative. I like the fact that a lot of people who are quite dull go, "Oh, you're quite interesting, aren't you?" Yeah, I am. Yeah, that's fine. If you don't like it, that's fine as well. So yeah, there are that kind of, I guess it's kind of sort of like colourful, no written rules, improvisation, everything that you'd expect somebody who, writes poetry and photographs stuff and rides bikes and tinkers and builds stuff. All of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's what I like about me. And now I know a lot of why it's there and how to fit it into context. That's good as well.
Yeah, so what you're describing really is your personality, and if ADHD is a diagnosis that you have, it's not your personality. Then it's your personality is your personality, and you experience ADHD, and that's something which is then part of you, but it's not completely. Yes. Am I right? And have I understood that correctly?
I now know the names for the things that power me.
Yeah, okay.
But it hasn't changed how I feel about those things that I like about me. I still like them.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it. That they
things about me that I don't like about me.
Yeah.
But now I know why they're there as well.
I like how you said that they power you. That's interesting. So I'm understanding it as if almost your personality is how you just described it, and ADHD is sort of like the mechanism and the engine that's sort of enabling you to be the person you are. Am I right? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. And also causing you to not necessarily fit into other sort of parts of things that, like office work or things like that, maybe. Yeah. Sorry, I spoke over you there.
No, that's right. I think I'm still me when I'm doing stuff that isn't kind of like my ADHD skills, if you like. Whatever that might be. I'm still I'm still my personality, but it's... When I'm given free rein to do all the stuff that I want to do, then I'm happiest because my ADHD quirks don't have to be suppressed. They don't have to be masked. And this is a word I'm learning, in the last year or so as it relates to neurodivergence. I'm not masking. It's really quite nice because I just talk my head off and people look at me and go, "Oh, sorry, I keep doing this."
Can you? No, I beg your pardon. As you were speaking, I was thinking, can you imagine a world in which neurodivergence and neurodiversity has been accepted and nobody actually talks about it anymore, so that we just are who we are, so to speak, and then you don't have to explain things and you can just be? Can you imagine a world like that, or would you prefer to keep
I did an arts degree, so everybody I knew was like that.
Yeah. Yes.
Everybody I knew was just completely just totally unreliable and just all off all over the place. Just like, these are my people. None of you are completely trustworthy in any way at all. I love it.
Okay, so then
it's such a contrast to growing up in North Oxford, where nearly everybody was essentially autistic, and I really felt like I didn't fit in because I'm at the other end of the scale, the neurodivergent people from the autistic people. So it was just like it was odd, and I thought I was normal. But then I met normal people and thought, no, I'm not normal. I'm a different sort of odd. So all my friends are neurodivergent, or nearly all of them. But you know how it is.
Yes, I understand. So so when did you, well, I suppose you've said this already actually, so when did you disclose your neurodivergence, and how comfortable are you, or were you? You've answered this question already actually, I suppose, in some way. It's really about stigma and whether or not you feel it's something that you tell people in general, or if you sort of keep it to yourself until you know somebody better and so on.
Yeah, no, I with dyslexia, obviously my employers found out because they were paying for it. I had no problem disclosing that at all because it was something that I was looking for as a diagnosis to make sense of the struggles that I'd had at school, and I kind of knew I was. And I told my mum, who had told me I wasn't, and then the first thing she said was, well, I knew you were all along. It's like, no, you didn't. Don't lie. You told me I wasn't, and I said, just try harder. So, I was really keen to get that out in the open and go, I'm dyslexic. I knew I was.
Yeah.
Thank you. I've got the validation I need. And I would tell that to people, rather than blurt it out necessarily, but I would tell them if the context was relevant, and that's fine. And the same thing with the ADHD. I'm not shy about telling people, but I wouldn't just run up to somebody and go, guess what? If it's in the conversation, it doesn't matter whether I know someone really well or not well at all. If it's going anywhere in the neighbourhood of neurodivergence, I'll happily talk about it. But equally, if it's completely irrelevant, I might not mention it at all. And
Yeah, understand. So would you sort of advise? Is there any advice that you'd give to people in your position who maybe, are just sort of learning that they have also a similar diagnosis? Have you got any advice for sort of how to, just any advice at all, really? We're grateful.
I probably have, but I don't know whether it's good advice. I would say that I'm aware of the fact that ADHD can be kind of seen as a fad or a fashion, kind of a Gen Z kind of. We're all ADHD, we're all neurodiverse in some way, and there's a bit of maybe there's a bandwagon kind of feeling to it. And certainly there are people who, when relating to ADHD, but I'm not another one. Oh, you're ADHD, are you?
Do you find that?
There's a bit of a pushback, and that would probably make me reluctant to bring up in conversation unless I was aware of the fact that it was relevant and contextual, or I thought the other person I was speaking to might also be neurodiverse. Yeah. In which case, I would be happy to, take the conversation in that direction.
Yeah. Okay. So, final question: what kind of developments would you like to see? How can you imagine I suppose really, a bit like the question that I asked earlier. How can you imagine the world progressing? What kind of a world would you like to live in, see for the future relating to neurodiversity and neurodivergence? How can you imagine it becoming better for everybody and research resources, support, understanding? Do you think, for instance, when you were younger, if there'd been more support for you back then, that would have made a huge difference to how things had gone on in your life? Do you think that would have changed everything?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The thing is that, whenever I started school in the 70s, there was no support for dyslexia, there was no support for ADHD. These things didn't exist unless you were illiterate and, badly misbehaving in the classroom.
Yeah.
Attitudes persisted up until really quite recently, certainly in terms of ADHD. If you weren't being disruptive and you weren't falling way behind, then you did intervention. And even then, the way these things tended to work was that you needed your parents to come into school and go, why isn't my child doing well enough? I demand that you give them help. Certainly with my family, that just wasn't going to happen. Would I like to see... I would like to see there being more help and support available, but I would like for that to happen, there needs to be more understanding and awareness and acceptance. Which means less judgment, and it means less of... Certainly in education, it means less of an emphasis on grades and league tables and more of developing the abilities that students actually have.
Yes.
That's obviously a completely different approach to education than the one that most of the developed world runs on.
Yeah.
But if you... No, I'm not an educationist, but I think if you allow people to play to their strengths and don't make them fit into what the school wants in terms of, they can then show off and try and use to recruit more students to get more money. It becomes it's a franchising model. It's not. It's a recruiting game.
Yeah.
How well do rather than how well suited to what they want to do or what they're capable of lead, because they don't belong to the school. They belong to the society. They belong to the world, and the school has them for a short amount of time. And making them into profit centres and results works really well for very, very normal people who can be trusted to do the circumstances that are offered to you. It's really well for people who are normal.
Yeah, it's moving more towards helping people, isn't it? But it's not. It's only a part of the way, obviously. Yeah.
I guess it probably is, but yeah, it's there will always be pushback from traditionalists and people who just think all you need to do is shout at people and encourage them by threatening. Just not sure how well that works.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. It's been really, really, really interesting talking to you. If there's anything else that you'd like to add, before we end the interview, just, I don't know, anything that particularly is something of great importance to you or anything, or you feel that you've said it all, then do say. And otherwise...
No, I think I've probably got most of what I want to say down at this stage.
Yeah, I hope I've asked the questions that you were hoping to be asked, and that you felt that you could answer in the way you wanted to answer. Yeah, because it's such an important subject, and it's so interesting talking to you and other people about this, because when one actually talks to somebody who's gone through the things that you've gone through, one starts to understand the levels upon with which people have had to deal with things that one has absolutely no idea about, and it definitely is already a step towards making the world better when people can begin to understand that, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think allowing people to be themselves is really important. But I know that there's a lot of societal norms and less attractive human behaviours that will always mitigate against accepting people who are oneself. So, it's an uphill struggle, but if you try, gradually people are born into a system that's more accommodating.
Yeah.
We no longer burn witches. We no longer punish left-handed people, and these were at one point, taken as read, that if you were left-handed and the devil was in control of you and you should write with your right. It's nonsense.
Yeah.
But maybe one day people will be allowed to be as different as they are and not judged for it, which would be really nice. I think it's happening with people in the sort of teens and early 20s, that generation of Zs, Gen Z. They're seeing more of that.
One sees that,
Our generation, our parents' generation, is that they go, oh, this wouldn't have happened in my day. They're just not working hard.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Fascinating. Really great to talk to you as ever. And thank you. And I think that everyone listening will find the interview as interesting and informative as I have done. And
I hope so.
So I hope you enjoyed being part of Brain Awareness Week at Arden.
I really liked it. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
To our listeners, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for listening to our podcast and being part of Arden's third Brain Awareness Week celebration. Through these interviews, we explore neurodivergent identity, key ways to mitigate and celebrate neurodivergent needs and skills, and interesting ideas for future brain-related research that some of you listeners might end up being a part of. This year we have a selection of podcast episodes along with an art competition. If you'd like some more information or a chance to be involved in next year's events, email baw@arden.ac.uk. Once again, a big thank you to all our guests and to the Brain Awareness team who made this podcast possible. And with that being said, take care and hydrate your brains.